Look, we all do the same thing when we're preparing for an interview. We Google interview questions. So this video is not about interview questions because in my experience, as much as I've prepared and over-prepared for interviews using sample questions I've found online or sample questions I've heard from other friends, they ask me something totally different. So in this video, we're talking about the things that you can do that will set you apart from other candidates, and it has nothing to do with the questions they ask you, and really it doesn't matter as much as these 5 key things. It may surprise you that I'm not going to get on here and say, dress professionally, prepare the questions, make sure you have the most professional textbook answers. I'm not going to say any of those things because having a good interview is about building relationships. So these 5 tips are going to be about building relationships because the more that administrators and teachers who are interviewing you feel like you're going to be a good team member, the more likely you are to get the job. So before we get into it, tell me in the comments what you're interviewing for this year. What positions are you interviewing for? What are you hoping to get? I really want to hear from you. If you're excited about a video that doesn't tell you to dress professionally, which you obviously know already, and just a bunch of things that you already know about, give me a thumbs up because I'm about to bring 5 tips that you maybe hadn't thought about that are going to make a huge difference in your interview. Okay, tip number 1 is to know your audience. So I was gonna call this tip like Facebook stalking your ex, but it's probably not super professional for a video on getting a teaching job. So what I want you to do is think about the last time that maybe you went on Facebook or the internet, you tried to find more information out about someone, whether or not it was somebody you've dated before or currently dated or just a friend or an actor or whatever. This is a skill that you're going to use on your interviews because I want you to go to the district website, the school website, and if there are any teacher websites for that grade level, go there as well. Because if you go to the district and the school website, you're going to find all the information of what's most important to them. So look for patterns, look for things that they talk about a lot. Do the students have specific devices? Do they use Google Classroom? Do they use Canvas? What do they actually use at that school? And that way you can focus in when you answer your questions on how you have strengths in those things. So it's really nice because you will actually know what they expect from their teachers before you even head into that interview. And so that way you can be that person. Now, I'm not saying to lie to them and say, yeah, I know Google Classroom when you've never used it before. But if it's something that you're like, hey, I know that this is something that's important to them, I can communicate how I'm really interested in learning more about it. And maybe I can play around a little bit in Google Classroom. Obviously, if it's something like Canvas, you can't, but you can make sure that you focus on how you're interested in using other tools of technology. It also helps if they have a bio for the principal. If the principal has a letter to parents, which they often do on the school website, you can read that as well. It has so many good pieces of information about what they're focusing on. So usually they'll tell you in the letter to the parents exactly what their priorities are with the students. And that's important for you to know because their priorities when you're teaching there are going to be your priorities. So read that letter over and over again. Make sure that those priorities shine through in your interview. And lastly, if they have individual teacher pages, and it's likely that that team will probably be in the interview with you, go to the grade level team and find out a little bit more about them. And that way you already feel like you know them and you'll feel more comfortable with them, but you can also see what types of things that they are assigning in their classrooms. Because the main goal here is for you to be a good fit for the position, which means you need to be a good fit and with what they're already doing. So they don't want to have to recreate everything around you. So that kind of information is going to be very helpful. Okay, tip number 2 is to emphasize the value that you add to the team. So in addition to you being an easy add because you are able to fit in with all of their priorities that we researched, you want to be able to add to the team. So this means what skills do you have to actually help them? So maybe it's something that teachers don't like planning field trips, and you've done that before. Or you have a similar experience, especially if you're a new teacher. I know it's hard to have an experience with something like planning field trips, but maybe you were on your volleyball team for your school and that's something that you like to help with. Maybe they have after school sports. So showing them how you can add value by focusing really on those skills that you have is really important. If you've done yearbook before or you're interested in graphic design, you could talk about that as well. And so you really just want to emphasize what you can add to them and also what you can take off their plate. Especially if you have other teachers on the team in the room, they want to know that you're not going to add a lot to their plates. They don't want to have someone who is extremely needy and doesn't feel like they can do anything on their own. So it's really important to put it out there that you have these skills, that you can do things on your own, that you're independent, but you're also willing to collaborate and work with them. This kind of leads into our next tip, because one of the main focuses of administrators is making sure that the teachers that they hire are not only going to do their jobs independently and do a great job for the students, but also be very coachable. So every time you switch to a different school, or if you're a new teacher coming in, they have to mold you to what they expect, because every administrator is very different. So they want to know that you're going to be very coachable, easy to mold, but also independent. So tip number 3 is to focus on professional and personal growth. So again, they want to see that you are willing to grow as a teacher and as a team member. So it's really important to focus on telling stories and giving answers that portray your personal professional growth. So you want to give them a lot of examples of ways that you have learned something new, you've grown, you've changed, you've become a great team member that's very flexible and can easily be molded if something new comes down the line. Because we know that things come down the line from the district office that are new pretty much every year and sometimes every month. So administrators who have to put that into play want to know that you're going to be willing to do whatever it takes to make those changes in your classroom or make that addition. So they want to know that you're a positive person that is able to grow and isn't going to get stuck in doing things the same way over and over again. I also make sure to express that I'm a lifelong learner. One of my favorite things is to learn new things, and that's through going to district trainings, going to trainings outside of schools, spending the time to read new research articles at home. So these are things that they want to know about. They want to know that you are going to be excited to learn new things and excited to put them in a place in your classroom. They don't want someone who is so confident that they give off the impression that they know everything, because someone who knows everything isn't going to change and isn't really going to be able to be molded to what they need at their school. So tip number 4, I think, is the most important, and that is to make a personal connection. So a personal connection can have you be chosen over somebody who has better answers, is better dressed, and has more experience. And here's how that works. So I've been in a lot of interviews before where I've been bored out of my mind because the person answers all the questions correctly. You know, they're dressed professionally, but I don't make a connection with them. There's really no conversation. Here's the question, here's the correct answer, and that's fantastic. But I don't leave the room thinking, man, I want to work with that person. And this really goes for both administrators and teachers. And sometimes administrators do just do the interviews as a formality, and they want to pick the person who has the most experience, and they've already decided that, and it is what it is. You're not going to beat out that person in that situation. But a good portion of the time, the principals are really invested in finding somebody that they're going to be able to get along with, that they're going to enjoy working with, because they're with you every single day. And the teachers feel that way too. If they're on the hiring committee or in the interview, they're feeling the same way, which is that some of the interviews are tedious and they're really looking for a team member, somebody that they can enjoy working with. So if you can build a personal connection, then you can actually give yourself a leg up from someone who maybe has more experience than you. So definitely let your personality shine. Don't be super nervous or super serious. You want to be professional, but you want to also show them that you're fun, energetic, and you really enjoy what you're doing and you really enjoy the time with them. And also take the time to ask them questions as well. And you can kind of brainstorm some questions beforehand, but a lot of times it happens naturally. You just want to make sure that you're being very personable and you're acting like how you would if you were at coffee with friends, just kind of like asking them a lot of things about themselves. So thinking about what questions can I ask them that are professional, but also will get them excited and engaged. And a lot of times when you do this, you'll find that you leave the interview thinking like, wow, I feel like I just had coffee with my best friends. And it's a really good fit for you. But sometimes you'll leave the interview and think, you know what, I was really nice and energetic and I was really trying to ask questions and they just didn't seem to care for it. And in that case, there's probably something going on, whether they've already hired someone for the position. That happens sometimes and it's very stressful and annoying. Or maybe they just are exhausted and they're really not looking to talk or converse. Or maybe they're just not a nice staff to work with. That's happened to me in the past where I've had an interview with a team and I was bubbly, energetic, and really excited, and I gave good answers and I asked questions, but they just didn't respond to anything. Like, could not make that personal connection. And I found out a year later when I actually met one of the teachers on the team with mutual friends that they were actually basically getting rid of a lot of teachers, having trouble with the administrator. Like, everybody was in a bad mood and nobody was really happy where they were. So in the interview, they really didn't care, and that really came through. So it can be a red flag if you go in trying to make a personal connection and they're not interested in that. And in that case, it is what it is. You tried your best, and there is probably a better fit for you out there. Right after that interview, I actually went and interviewed at a school where I did the same thing, try to make a personal connection, and they ended up not really asking me any standard teaching questions. They wanted to know about myself and my hobbies because we just matched so well. And it was probably the best school I've ever worked at. It was great. In fact, wouldn't have left except for the fact that that I was having twins and they were switching up administrators, and it just is what it is. But it ended up being a fantastic fit because I worked really well with the coach, with the administrator, and with the teachers. And that brings me to tip number 5, which is just to keep it simple. You don't want to ramble on it, although you have lots of ideas and lots of opinions. Keep your answers very concise and to the point, and try to remember that they're interviewing a lot of people and these interviews are very long, and making it longer for them, it's kind of like being in a teacher training when you're thinking like, you could have sent this to me in an email or you could have done this training in 30 minutes, but then you wasted 8 hours of your day. So you want to make sure that you're keeping it very short and concise, and that'll give you more time to also ask them questions and build a personal connection. The same goes for technology. You want to show what technology skills you have and maybe give a couple short examples of ways you've used technology in your student teaching or in your past jobs, but don't go too in depth. Because remember, especially the administrators, they don't actually do a lot of the technology. They just want to know that you're able to use it, and they just want to know your experience, but they don't really need to know like 20 ideas that you have for it, because that just is very overwhelming. So they want to know that you know the basics, that you can implement things simply, and that you're not going to be all over the place with 20 different ideas, but you're able to really focus in on the technology use in the classroom. And in your answers, when you're giving them simple, concise answers, really remind yourself it should be student focused. So we're focusing on the outcome for the students, which is really the primary reason that you're there. Remember that this interview is just as much for you as it is for them. So making sure that you're a really good fit before you sign a full year's contract with the school. So if things seem kind of off, or you don't just really seem to connect personality-wise, don't take that as a negative necessarily, because it's telling you something about what you would be dealing with the next year if you got the job and signed on with them. So it may be possible that you just need to find a school that's a different fit. I know that's hard when we're trying to look for our first job and there's a lot of competition, but things happen for a reason, and try to remember that as you're interviewing. You want to make sure you're in the right place. And sometimes, as awesome as you are at an interview, or just as awesome as a person you are, It just doesn't come through properly in an interview and it doesn't go well, and that's okay. Give yourself some grace. We're not gonna have a perfect interview every single time, and we're gonna get better at it every single time. So don't feel bad if you go to an interview and it just doesn't work out. You are not a failure and you're going to get a teaching job. You just need to keep these tips in mind. Find a school that's a great fit for you and that feels the same way about you for them. If you're interviewing for a 2nd through 8th grade position, what I want you to do is make sure that you hit the subscribe and the notifications bell so that you can get updates from my channel, because I release videos every single Sunday with free resources included that you can use in your new classroom. And lastly, best of luck to you. I hope that you find a position that's an awesome fit. And let me know in the comments how your interview goes. I really want to hear from you. And hopefully you'll stick around, and that way we can work together when you get your new classroom and I can give you some free resources. So again, make sure to subscribe. And if that happens, I'll see you in the next video.